Welcome to episode 9 of our podcast, Kidsplorers. We're so excited that you're joining us on our journey to explore and discover new things. You might remember that in our last episode, we learned about the RMS Titanic. We explored how it was built, when it departed on its famous voyage, and what happened on the night of April 15th, 1912, when it collided with a giant iceberg. At the end of the last episode, Daniel suggested that we should learn about bees. As our family slowly gets ready to welcome spring into our little backyard farm, we're all looking forward to welcoming back all the insects that visit us and live on our plants. We're always so grateful for the bugs that we see because we know that our little farm would not be able to give us flowers and food without these tiny creatures. So guys, let's get started.
Yes, please. I love all pollinators, but bees are just incredible. I became interested in learning about them ever since we started our backyard farm. This past week, I was wondering how we can explore these incredible insects, but since it's still too cold in Canada to see them flying around, I thought we could pay a visit to Professor Smarty Pants, who is working in New Zealand as we speak.
What is he doing in New Zealand?
Professor told me that he will be in New Zealand to study the benefits of honey. What do you guys think about flying out to see him?
I love this idea.
Me too, to the airport. We're here, and there's Professor Smarty Pants.
Hello friends, welcome to sunny New Zealand.
Hi, Professor. It's so cool that we went from cold and snowy Canada to warm and sunny New Zealand.
Professor, we came here to learn about bees and to try some honey, of course.
Well, you definitely came to the right place. I am in New Zealand this week because I'm studying why honey is so healthy for people and how bees produce it.
Professor, why did you come all the way to New Zealand to learn about this?
Well, it actually has to do with the weather. Do you know why when the temperature drops below 12 degrees Celsius, we don't see many bees out and about in Canada?
No, why don't we see them?
Such cold temperatures can kill the bees. Instead, to survive and keep warm, bees do something very interesting. Actually, I'd love to know, what do you do to keep warm when you are cold?
I like to get big hugs from Mommy and Daddy. They are always super warm and hugging them makes me warm.
Me too.
That's exactly what the bees do. To keep warm, the bees surround the queen bee and keep her warm by flapping their wings. All of the flapping can not only keep the hive warm, but almost hot.
But how can they eat in the winter?
During the spring and summer seasons, worker bees make as much extra honey as possible in order for it to provide them with food all winter. The more they store, the more food they will have for the cold weather.
Professor, do all bees live in big hives?
Great question. Let me first tell you that there are actually more than 20,000 different species of bees in the world. Only about half of them actually live in hives with colonies of bees. The rest of these species are solitary bees.
What does colony and solitary mean?
A colony of bees is a group of bees that live together in a hive. A hive can have about 50,000 bees. On the other hand, solitary bees are bees that live alone and do not belong to a colony.
Hey, did you guys know that of all the species of bees, only one kind makes honey?
That's right. The only bees that produce honey belong to the Apidae family of bees. These include the cuckoo, carpenter, digger, bumble, and honeybees.
Professor, you mentioned worker and queen bee. What is the difference between them?
Great question, Isabella. Different bees in a hive have different jobs, and it really depends what group the bees belong to. The biggest bee in a hive is the queen bee. The queen bee has a couple of roles. She is the only fertile bee, which means that she's the only one who can lay eggs and make new baby bees for the colony. Other than laying eggs, queen bees also produce chemical smells which keep the hive friendly and supportive. Every hive must have a queen bee. Without one, a colony cannot survive.
Wow, it sounds like she's the boss of the hive.
In many ways, she is the center of life in the hive. Another group of bees in a hive is the drone bees. Drones are male bees, and they are needed in the hive because they are reproductive bees. This means that they help the queen bee make baby bees.
I know a few interesting facts about drone bees. Drone bees do not have a stinger like some other bees. Also, you could tell a drone bee apart from other honeybees by exploring the shape of its head. Drone bees have a much bigger head and eyes than other bees.
Very interesting. Well, this leaves us with the last group of bees, the worker bees.
That's right. The worker bees have a pretty tough job. Have you heard the expression, as busy as a bee? This saying is about worker bees. This group of bees rarely rest and spend most of their time working. The worker bee's main job is to collect nectar and pollen from plants and flowers. Inside the hive, they have a few other jobs, like cleaning the hive, building new combs, which are the little hexagon shapes in the hive, and taking care of the baby bees.
That's so cool. But bees are tiny. How can they carry all this pollen and nectar?
Bees might be tiny, but they're very mighty. Worker bees can actually carry 1/3 of their weight in pollen. If you've ever seen a bee with a lot of yellow pollen on her back legs, it is because the bee has a special body part on the back legs called corbiculi. It acts like a little basket where worker bees collect the pollen. She uses her legs to make the pollen form into a ball, and she keeps it stuck together with the help of saliva and nectar. Once it's all packed nicely in her baskets, she carries it back to the hive.
That's right. But did you know that bees keep pollen in other parts of their bodies too? Bees have 3 million hairs on their bodies, even on their eyes. When they collect pollen, the hairs on their body trap quite a bit of pollen. This allows the bee to bring back even more pollen to the hive. All this pollen, as well as nectar, is used to feed baby bees and the queen bee. The leftover nectar is turned into honey.
The word pollen sounds similar to the word pollination.
You're absolutely right. Pollination comes from the word pollen. When the bees land on a flower, they collect pollen. As they fly from flower to flower in search of nectar, some of the pollen on their bodies, which they collected from previous flowers, gets left behind on new flowers. This process of leaving pollen from other flowers on new flowers is called pollination. Pollination allows plants to reproduce, which allows flowers, plants, and food to grow and develop. Without pollination, we would not be able to grow any food or flowers.
Absolutely. If pollinators such as bees would not travel from flower to flower, we would lose a huge amount of food we eat because the flowers and plants that grows this food would not be pollinated.
But how do bees know how to find pollen?
Well, let me ask you this. When you eat food, what part of your body can taste the flavors of your food?
The tongue, of course. Our tongue has many taste buds.
That's right. Well, bees can recognize taste, but a bit differently. Bees have 300 taste sensors on their antennae, but can also use their tongues, jaws, front feet to detect tastes. A bee's sense of smell is 100 times more powerful than a human's.
What is antennae?
Antennae are the two sticks which are visible on a bee's head. It helps the bee to collect pollen, feel distance, touch, taste, and smell.
This is so cool. It sounds like worker bees are very busy.
Did you know that honeybees have very unusual tongues? Their tongues are hollow like a straw. This helps them suck water and nectar from a plant. And, of course, enjoy some honey.
There's something else that bees use their straw-like tongue for. In our very first episode, we explored penguins and how they feed their babies. Do you guys remember how they do that?
I do. To feed the penguin chicks, Mama penguin throws up her digested food into the baby mouth.
I remember this. It's very yucky.
It definitely is a little different from the way humans eat. But bees actually feed their babies very similarly to penguins. When they return to the hive from collecting nectar and pollen, worker bees often rush to feed the baby bees. The way they feed the smaller bees is actually by vomiting the sweet nectar that they collected into the baby bee's mouth.
Ew!
I'm surprised to learn that a few animals do that, but I bet it's easier to do this with a hollow tongue.
It sure is. Professor, I was wondering if you could tell us about how the bees live together in the hive.
Of course, as you said, a bee colony or a group of bees live together in a hive. Inside the hive, the bees build many little combs, which are hexagonal shapes. This is where they store honey and something called bee bread.
Wait, bees eat bread?
They eat bee bread, but it's different from the bread we eat. Let me explain this a bit better. As we explored, the main job of worker bees is to fly around and collect nectar, which is sugar water, and pollen, which is the tiny yellow powder on flowers. When they return to the hive, worker bees feed their digested nectar, which is the nectar they already drank, to the baby bees. The pollen which they collect is then put to storage in the combs. Bees use a bit of honey to glue the pollen together so it does not fly around. Bees eat bee bread because it's the only source of protein.
It must take a lot of flowers to collect enough pollen for everything they need.
It really does. In a single trip, a worker honeybee can visit 50 to 100 flowers to collect pollen and nectar. It might seem like a lot, but in her entire life, a worker bee will make only 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. It would actually take 556 bees to make a pound of honey. This is why bees are so good at teamwork.
That's incredible. I don't know other animals that work this hard.
I agree. Well, guys, there's actually one more reason why I came to New Zealand to study honey and bees. As we discussed, bees make an extremely important liquid, honey. People have been using honey for thousands of years, going back as far as the ancient Egyptians.
No way, Professor. Why is honey so important to people?
Honey has so many health benefits. It can help with sore throats, wound healing, bad mood, and so much more.
Mommy, is this why you give us honey when we're sick?
Absolutely. And it usually helps you guys right away.
All honey is very healthy, but New Zealand has a special type of honey called the Manuka honey. To make this honey, bees in New Zealand collect pollen and nectar from a special bush called the tea tree bush. You can see it over here. The flowers on this bush are beautiful. They are little white and pink flowers, and bees are always buzzing around them. When they bring it back to the hive, they pack it into the honeycombs and dry it out with the breeze from their wing flaps. This process turns the nectar into honey. Manuka honey is considered extremely healthy and can be quite expensive if you want to buy it. Here, let's try some Manuka honey.
Oh, yum. This is delicious, Professor. I know a lot of people that are scared of bees. Are they really dangerous?
It's definitely true that some people have an allergy to a bee sting. Like all other allergies, this could be quite dangerous. But generally, bees do not want to sting people. As I mentioned, not all bees even have a stinger. Those who do will only use it if they feel scared, need to protect themselves, or chase away animals who are close to their hive. Bees really don't want to use it because most likely if they use the stinger will separate from their body, which will cause the bee to die. The general rule is, if you don't bother a bee, it will not bother you.
Very cool. Hey guys, I have a joke for you. What do you call a bee trying to make up its mind?
I don't know. What do you call it?
A maybe. Get it? A maybe.
Haha, very funny.
Professor, we learned so much from you today. Thank you for this awesome field trip. It's time that we head back home now.
Thank you for coming, friends. See you soon.
Thanks, Professor. To the airport.
This was a long trip.
It sure was, but I learned so much.
Absolutely. So, guys, what should we explore in our next episode?
I've been thinking. Do you know March is Women's History Month?
I did actually. Hey, Isabella, didn't you tell me that you'd like to learn about Amelia Earhart?
Oh, yes. She's a very interesting person, and I would love to learn about her adventures.
That's an incredible idea. Amelia Earhart is definitely a wonderful person to learn about, given all her accomplishments in aviation. Friends, join us again next Sunday as we explore the life of Amelia Earhart. We really hope that you liked today's episode. We would be so excited if you would share our podcast with all your friends who you think would like to join us on our explorations. We always look forward to hearing from you about any feedback and suggestions for what you'd like us to explore in future episodes. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching Kitsplorers Podcast. In the meantime, if you liked our episode today, we will be so excited if you could give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platform that you listen to us on. It will mean so much to us. And this is it.